Wow, I was speaking and the mic was off. It's what happens when you've got nobody watching, I guess. People don't tell you that you're speaking in empty space. I was talking about how the construction rules for Battletech are pretty important because of how they're the thing that basically keep the game less about balance and more about everything stays more or less consistent. You don't have that in things like Warhammer or even War Machine, War Horde, because those systems generally you have the models and then they create rules for them and try to balance them out. It's the opposite when you're dealing with Battletech, where they create the units and then at some point someone makes the model. You're already lucky sometimes if somebody wrote some fluff before a mech is created. That happened a few times with Stackpole when he was writing the Warrior Trilogy, with the Wolfhound, probably Raven Cataphract. Those Fourth Succession War mechs kind of fell into that weird category there where they were probably created while other things were going on, basically. But a lot of times it's just we need to create we need to make a technical readout. Someone draws up a bunch of mechs and they put equipment on them, or they write up the unit and then something happens from it. Didn't have as much time as last time to get prepared, at least for the stream itself. But for the document itself, it's a 43-page document. I'm not going to go over all of it, especially if nobody's really watching. What I really want is to have people look at it with me and try to balance things out with me. There are things in there that I took some time to think of and try to balance already, but not as much as it should. There's stuff that I haven't had time to play test or anything here. It's just stuff that I threw on the wall to see if it sticks. But there's a lot of things in the construction rules, but most of them are actually fairly straightforward. I mean, constructing a mech in Battletech is a matter of just doing a few selections. How big your mech's going to be, how fast it's going to go. And after that, well, you fill out the blanks because that's the really important bit. I'm still going to calculate things as mech weight and tonnage for now as I'm going through this. But one thing you can think of whenever you're dealing with trying to revise or go through the mech creation rules here, you can replace tonnage with just mech value or battle points or whatever, as long as it's something that you can use to even out like different categories of mechs, from your light, your mediums, your heavies, your assaults. Even that particular definition can be modified as much as you want and can be made bigger, made smaller as you wish. In regular Battletech, everything's done in 5-ton increments. There's odd things with vehicles. There's some vehicles like the H7 Warrior helicopter that's a 21-ton helicopter, but it basically is calculated like a I can't remember how they actually count for the engine. It's a 50 rated ICE on a 21-ton helicopter, and it goes 1015 for the speed, 151 kilometers per hour. If I remember, that's what that would be, 1015, which is fast enough for an helicopter. But I mean, you could have transitional masses like this between the five points, like the normally do on for battle mechs, you could do the exact same thing for battle mechs that for that particular helicopter. The important bit is what kind of engine rating are you going to be putting in. You just gotta everybody needs to agree as to what it's going to be, and then it would work just fine. um I mean, it's just whenever I'm dealing with the construction rules here, I'm going to deconstruct them at the same time as talking about them and going through my thought process here, because I want to be able to, just play Battletech. That's just fun here. But as we were doing last week, we were talking about creating a new setting or having fun with settings. And one thing we can do is if we play with those construction rules, we can expand the base setting of Battletech. A lot of people, there's all sorts of other mech combat games out there. Heavy Gear was never really popular, but it was fun. I played it quite a bit. But it went from being its own thing to being a Warhammer clone recently. So that made it a little bit different. And this wasn't a game with construction rules, and it wasn't a game with very specific thing. It was a Votom's remake, more or less. It worked fairly well as that, but it wasn't meant to be like Battletech, as an example. Lancer, from what I've heard, is good as an RPG, but as anything else, it doesn't quite hold the candle. So Battletech has this advantage over all these other systems, that it has this core of construction rules, which can be used to expand in whichever way you want, because you don't need to be bound by anything. You don't need to be bound by models. You don't need to be bound by anything particular outside of what's in those construction rules, which I am going to go over and break apart, basically. The idea here is to break them apart so we have more options if we were to make our own setting and our own ideas. I don't know if that makes sense to anybody that's watching or anybody that wants to watch in the future, but we're going to go over a few things here. Not to go into in depth in terms of the rules. I'm not going to change any rules or go over anything unusual there. I'm really going to go like different things that we can play with in this new universe, let's say. So the first thing I was looking at, we were talking really quick here. Do we really have to go by 5-ton increments? Not really. Is 100 tons automatically the maximum for a battle mech? Not necessarily either. Think about it this way: everything here would be could be changed, could be played with. We just go with ideas. The original idea there dates from 2022, and I was really splitting technology into 6 level. I know back in the old days there was level 1 and level 2, and level 3 was the weird experimental stuff. But here I was really spreading it out, with level 1 being the most primitive of technologies, and level 6 being things that would be, how could I say, would be things that are future tech in terms of Battletech technology, stuff that you wouldn't see on even a Ilkan battlefield. So the most basic thing I went with first was thinking of the different motive systems that are available. In Battletech, right now, there's 2 motive systems, bipedal or quad. Those are really the 2 options that you have. First thing you can do, if you want to break that down, you can break it down. And as you can see here, I broke it down quite a bit. A lot of it was going on that tech level thing. And I think that's a way to look at it. Your regular man-walker bipedal mech would be your base model. No different change, no different things weird. In the base technology level, chicken walker would also exist. This one, I'm not 100% sure what to do. The basic ear that I have the okay, that's a bit messed up because it's a doc originally, and it's now an ODT. So some of the formatting went out the window. Doesn't really change much here. My first idea here for Chicken Walker: -1 penalty to piloting skills, but +1 on all physical attacks. That's one thing that would differentiate it from bipedal. If we were to go Armored Core 6 route, let's say, the same thing as in Armored Core 6. Armored Core, the Chicken Walker are the jumpy models. We could go with something like Chicken Walker gives you +1 jump movement point, but you'd have to trade it off with something else. So maybe -1 top speed. I'm not sure here which would be the best because, I mean, we can't test in real life what a Chicken Walker mech would do compared to a Man Walker mech. We already have hard enough time just making a robot walk nowadays, to be honest. But if we start thinking this way, just having a difference between your standard Man Walker and your Chicken Walker already gives you a little bit more depth into what you can do when you start doing mech creation. Is it necessary in this particular thought exercise here? What we're doing here, yes, we're trying to break it down. So this is what I look at here between Chicken Walker and Man Walker. If anybody wants to speak up as to what they would do with Chicken Walker, you can leave it in the comments. You can comment in the chat here as well. I will be glad to look at it and talk about it. Underwater operations. This was what I was putting in at tech level 2, which would be your standard inner sphere technology level, more or less. But underwater operations are battle mech meant to either do underwater combat or amphibious combat. The main thing here is that those would be really specialized battle mechs more than standard ones. So if you were doing some construction and you decide to do an underwater operations mech, it wouldn't just be okay, I'm taking a Wolverine and I'm making it underwater. No, you would have to actually mess with some things to do it. Underwater operation, 5% of the mech weight used in conversion equipment and survival equipment. And one critical location used in every location except the ed, just so you still have that one ed slot that you can play with. Probably if you get it in one of those location and the critical for the underwater conversion equipment is destroyed, you lose the location completely. Right now, underwater combat rules in Battletech is if you get a critical hit and your armor is penetrated, you lose the location immediately. Here it would balance it out a little bit by putting this in. As tech levels increase, the critical requirements, weight of the equipment goes down since things get more and more refined. Underwater operations mech need jump jets, basically the UMUs, I think they call them in Battletech, underwater mobility units. So you'd have something here to move underwater. A thing, it's not written right here, but a thing that I've noted down below as well, you could probably take out some of the leg actuators on mechs with underwater operations or space operations. Both of them would kind of work. To have those mechs that can only work underwater or only work in space. If you've seen old Gundam stuff, well, I say old Gundam. Well, it is. Nowadays, I mean, I would say it's old now. The Cancer mobile suit, as an example, is roughly put, it's a mech, but it doesn't have legs or very minimal legs, just a lower leg assembly so it can thrust around. So you could build something like that for water or space operation by taking out some of those leg actuators, but then you wouldn't be able to use that mech on solid ground. I think that would give you a little bit more options to play with. And if you want to go with your very traditional amphibious mech, your Z-Gox, your Zox, your Zono from Gundam Seed, all those funky names, because I don't know why the Japanese go with really funky names for the amphibious mechs. You could do those as well, but in that case, you'd have the full leg assembly, and those underwater mobility unit can be turned into jump jets once you're out of the water. That might require more conversion equipment. I mean, that's everything we're doing here, remember, is thought exercises. So in terms of balance here for the underwater or space operation, the important bit here is you can do it, but you need some conversion equipment. Some weight of your mech is spent on being able to survive underwater or survive in space. Space combat with battle mechs would probably be completely different. Does that remove the requirement for aerospace fighters? Probably not at the start at least, but then as you evolve in technology and things like that, well, sometimes battle mech would start being better than aerospace fighters. You see that we're, yes, going into Gundam territory here, but I don't think it's a bad thing, and I think Battletech could benefit from having more battlefields to fight on than just regular ground. So it's just something that's fun in the end and something you can add on if necessary. I don't think it breaks the game at all. Except space combat would probably be rather awful because there's not a whole lot of cover when you're in space unless there's asteroids everywhere, which would probably be the best place to go and fight with battle mechs in space, actually. Afterwards, what else? We've got the standard quad, which I actually split the quads into two categories. The heavy quad, which is your quads like your Scorpions, your Goliath, those very large quads that use the four legs to actually be more stable and be able to, walk around and not fall. Walking tanks, basically. As with the regular rules, allow lateral movements. Heavy, the stable ones give you a -2 to all piloting skill checks, which is very good. And as a mean to balance the quads, right now I set at tech level 4. You add 6 critical slots to the heavy quad ed. But this could be a lot wider here. We could start that a lot earlier. I mean, as soon as you're a quad, you get 6 extra critical slots in your head. We could go with that as well, just to balance it out, because you do lose 12 critical slots. As soon as you build a quad, you're 12 critical slots down compared to a regular battle mech. And that's not counting potentially up to 4 less as well, since you take out the arm actuators for more guns, things like that on many mechs. So maybe not a bad idea on quads to have this available. I mean, it adds a second block of criticals in your ed module, basically. I'm not sure if it's be worded. I'm not sure if it would be balanced. That's the thing that I haven't tested, because that's a lot harder to test than a lot of the other things here. Siege mode, I am not sure if it's worth it at all. I threw that in together because one of my friend likes the siege tanks from StarCraft. Makes your mech immobile, but gives you a bonus to eat sinks and to it on ballistics and PPCs, and cannot fall due to damage. That's what I wrote down. Requires some conversion equipment and some critical slots. I'm not sure if it would be good enough here, or it would be too good, or because you could just make it too good as well. I mean, if you give too big of a bonus to accuracy. Becoming immobile is a pretty big weakness, since speed gives you survivability in Battletech a lot more than other games. That's a lot of thinking, basically. That's a thing where I would need to sit down and probably theory tech it quite a bit. Back to the quads, the mobile quad. Those are really the quads that are meant to move a lot quicker due to their form, rather than a bonus to your piloting skills. A movement point cost reduction when going through difficult terrain. So going through forest, rough terrain, rivers, water, etc., you'd be getting a little bit of a discount on the movement. Once again, this is something that needs to be theory crafted. I don't think it'd be that bad. Probably be fairly good. But does it equal like losing those extra critical slots, etc.? It's not always easy to do. Multiple leg designs, if you want to go with 6 legs, 8 legs, things like that. I mean, just for design purposes, I think you don't need to go with anything fancier than that. Where we go to some of the fancier things. Overtrust system. You see that a lot in Japanese anime, once again. Those mechs that, they've got legs, but they don't really walk. They just, hover or float around the battlefield, moving really, really quick. That would be something that you could do in something like Battletech using the rules that exist. Give bonus to walking speed, clear road, terrain. You can hover over water a little bit. I can hovercraft. But if you're trying to go through forest, rough terrain, you have to pay double the movement cost because you actually have to land and actually walk, and your legs are not always built like regular battle mech legs. In order to balance things out, 5% of your weight being used in lift equipment, a little bit, once again, like an hovercraft. Use critical slots in torsos and legs to compensate for it, and requires you to have jump jets. As soon as your lift equipment is damaged, you can't use your special movement anymore. Not compatible with triple strength Myomer mask or triple strength Myomer or mask. The supercharger would probably work with that. You would generate more EAT while moving. And as the technology level goes up, once again, maybe the weight of the equipment goes down, the requirement number of criticals go down, just to try to balance it out a little bit. Your different mech transformations. I do like lambs personally, but I do find that they were never exploited as much as they could, basically. I've never played with quad Vs. I did put it down here, but I'm not sure what the real advantages of quad Vs are because I've never played with them, and I don't know anyone who's actually played with them. But the first level of transformable mechs, bimodal lambs, there's 2 versions. One that turns you into the VTOL Guardian mode, requires a partial wing, first thing here, and part of your weight to be used in conversion equipment. Same thing, you also have the option that's the Wave Rider, which turns you from mech to aerospace fighter. Once again, requires a partial wing. Just so you, it gives you a little bit more realism, let's say, to the whole thing. Full lamb with the VTOL and aerospace fighter mode. I just went with it with being higher tech level. And battle mechs with actual flight mode rather than having to transform. That would be the highest possible technology available. I was playing around as well with extra critical slots being given, depending on the tech level, to battle mechs to represent that they become more performant and more able to slot in equipment. That's very, very secondary here. It's just something I was thinking of. Internal structure. When you start your battle mech creation, basically, after you chose your motive system, you've chosen your weight. Well, you have to select that, gives you what the kind of internal structure you're going to have to put in. I went with as many internal structures as possible, as with everything else here. With your basic industrial battle mech here for 20% of your weight, standard internal. And rather than going with the standard Battletech with standard, then endo steel, go with composite structure and endo composite before you go to the bigger weight save of the endo steel. It's pretty much the standard rule I've played with here since the start when doing this. When they did the technical readout 2750, and they introduced the endo steel, the double heat sinks, the ferrofibrous, all that advanced technology. Well, a lot of the stuff was a step ahead in technology, was far more advanced than what the inner sphere currently had. And while it kind of fit the setting, there should have been some transitional technologies that we haven't seen on there. So I just went with that here. Put your endo composite available before your endo steel as an example. And an option for an advanced endo composite, kind of a clan endo composite for 4 critical slots rather than 7. Ardent internal structure, which reduces the chances of critical. And there's ardent version of the endo composite, ardent version of the endo steel. Like I said here, I'm throwing things against the wall to see if it sticks, basically. So we've got a lot of options I'm trying to bring in this design document so people can play with fancy stuff. Minimal endo composite would be like endo composite at the highest possible level, takes just like 2 critical slots rather than 7. Minimal endo steel taking 4 critical slot rather than 7. So that would be like your fanciest possible tech. Battle mech engines have always been a weird thing for me because the fusion engine is the standard engine and it's probably the best one that's available. So if we look here, early technology, you've got your standard ICE. I'm not sure an ICE engine should actually weigh double the weight of a fusion engine. Because that makes those engines really, really heavy. That's one thing. But in real life, I mean, even with the gas tank, it's not going to be that heavy. So the ICE section here, it's not something that should be used on battle mechs. It should be used on combat vehicles. And it's maybe something that we would need to look at completely separately. Fuel cell. Right now is the big thing in the Ilkan era. If you've noticed, a lot of vehicles are all being rebuilt using fuel cells rather than ICE engines, which I think is a good idea. I mean, it's kind of fits like a more modern idea of what we could be using. And same thing, early primitive battle mechs using fuel cells would not be out of the realm of possibility. They come built in with just one heat sink, though. So I've played around with that, made a few battle mechs using fuel cell engines. The one thing you really have to start worrying about is having to stick heat sinks on. Just putting 2 medium lasers in. If you start shooting those 2 medium lasers, you're going to start overheating really quickly if you don't start sticking the necessary number of heat sinks, because you're not going to have that buffer of 10, which you normally do. And the weight of a fuel cell is 20% of your equivalent fusion engine. So a 10-ton fusion engine would be 12-ton instead, which is a thing that is kind of reasonable here if you want to play with that. Primitive fusion is what you see if you look at old models, your Mackeys, your first Griffins, your early Ymirs, Gladiators, things like that, which were 20% less efficient than a fusion engine. So rather than increasing the weight of the engine directly, what the designers originally did in the game was multiply the engine rating by 1.2. So that's why the Mackie, in its original form, uses a 360 fusion engine to go 3.5 rather than a 300. The one thing that got me thinking, though, is right now after that, we've got our standard engine modifiers, your fusion, your light fusions, your XL, compact, advanced XL for your clan, XXL engines. We'll see the weird ones I've thought of after as well. But that got me thinking here, if the old primitive fusion engines were less efficient, could we have fusion engines that are more efficient? I'm not sure how that would work, because that's something that's never been tried, never been played with. And I was thinking about that earlier this week, actually. If you move forward in technology, would we be able to have high efficiency fusion engines? So your rather than a 300 to go 3.5 if on a 100-ton mech, could it be a 290, a 280, a 260 instead? Meaning that you have higher efficiency engines compared to the standard. This is difficult, once again, to see if it would be balanced, because this is a thing that's never been tried in Battletech. And there's things that would go sideways with that as well, because if you remember, you don't have to stick in heat sinks. If your engine starts being big enough, it's technically every 25 points of engine, you don't have to stick one heat sink in. So at 250, you're flush. You don't have to add any heat sinks in your critical slots. If it's less than that 250, it can start being confusing. If we start having more efficient engine with the same, would we follow the same rules? Would we play with this the same way? I am not 100% sure. That's a thing that I would really want to, how do you say that? To workshop around with people. Maybe just have some people do the math on their side, try to see if it'd be fun, if it'd be playable, etc. Things that I thought of on the side. Technically a clan version of the light fusion engine. So one slot being used in each side torsos rather than two, and you still save that 25% on there. It's an idea that I add, doesn't mean that it's good, but it's something. And then we go with the really fancy engine, the compact light fusion engine, which requires the same number of slots as a regular engine in the center torso, but that's really high tech. That might have to go if we start changing things to have the high performance engines. And a compact XL engine, which takes all the extra critical slots in your center torso, but weighs 50% of the weight. This one here, I think, is not balanced, but it's a bit of a trade-off, at least, compared to this one, which would be you always take it when it's available. So this is just things that I was throwing around, basically. Cockpits. In Battletech, the cockpit options are extremely limited. You basically have a cockpit or you're not a battle mech. As technology went on, and later on, we did have a few different things available. The small cockpit being added during the jihad, as an example. Small cockpit, I think, is a good idea, but one thing we talked about earlier for underwater operation and space operations, since you don't have both your life support slots, you can't use a small cockpit if you're underwater operations or space operations. Kind of goes hand in hand here. A thing that I've done as well to try to make not everybody needs to have it if they're underwater operation or space operation, but good commanders would use it. Extra survival cockpits, which gives 3 life support slot and a life support it bubble. Like your sensors, like your engine, your gyro, you'd get a life support it bubble, which would be very good if you're, in space. So you can take a hit to your life support and not die. I think this is just a fair thing. I put it at 3.5 tons, maybe 4 tons would be better. I'm not 100% sure here. Once again, that's a thing that doesn't exist in the main game. So you have to be okay with it. You have to start workshopping it and testing it. I went with a version of the advanced small cockpits, which is basically a small cockpit without the penalty to your piloting skill checks, which is a higher tech version of the small cockpit. Basically, if you're going to be a land combat only battle mech, you could, at higher tech levels, you could just stick small cockpits in and people would be just fine with it. Full head ejection system never cost anything. So this one here I've always had problems with because all it does is increase the C-build cost of the mech. It is what it is. Command consoles, same thing as in the base game. For now, there's different versions that I've added on there. An armored command console, 4 tons. A small cockpit version of the command console as well, just to have different options and different things to play with. And of course, the dual cockpit that we also know exists in Battletech, even though it's not used all that often. There's not that many cockpit options that I put down, because even the super fancy ones, the torso mounted one, the direct neural input ones, I've never played with. I don't know how balanced or how weird they work, so I don't want to play with that until I've rolled a few dices, basically. Gyro, this year I've very little to really talk about or say. Just playing with standard, compact, heavy duty, XL, or your standard gyro options. Compact heavy duty could exist as well. It would just be fairly heavy. And in this case here, try to balance it out as well. Generate some heat every turn. Not sure that would be necessary. Just have to look at it. Next up, when you're going to creation, normally they want you to see if you can add jump jets. For now, in regular Battletech, you've got, well, technically 3 options for jump jets. Your jump jets, your improved jump jets, and that weird mechanical booster thing. I haven't touched a mechanical booster. I need to reread the rules for that. But here, regular jump jets, the rules haven't changed. Improved jump jets, the rules haven't changed. I've played a little bit for higher tech levels, superior jump jets, which are improved jump jets that only take 1 critical slot. So they weigh the same weight as an improved jump jet, but they take less critical slot. Light jump jets, which weighs half the weight of a standard jump jet, so you can easily fit more if necessary. Compact jump jets, and the super fancy maximum jump jets, who are improved jump jets that take 1 critical slot and weigh the same weight as a regular jump jet. That's just to play with how fancy you can get with some technology. Partial wings, not a very big thing in regular Battletech. There's all the mechs that have them are pretty much Jade Falcon Totem mechs. There's a few odd ones here and there. They're not super popular because they're not really that good. Here, one of the reason why they kind of improved the reason why you'd want to put them on is because you would be able to use the partial wing to get your lamb and your transforming mech. So not a bad thing there. The wing in regular Battletech depends on the weight, what it actually does. Here I went with something straight instead, +2 movement point, 3E dissipated per turn, which is what it does on standard mechs, or light mechs and medium mechs. On heavy mechs, it just gives a +1 to movement speed, and it starts costing way too much for what it does. I'm basically just playing around here a little bit. Vector Trust kits, that's when you get fancier partial wings. It's a partial wing with jump jets built into it. So if you have your wing kit, there's 2 jump jets already included in it. So you don't have to stick additional jump jets in your critical slots. That's the biggest advantage of it. Deployable wheeling kits, I am not sure I'm going to stick that around, so I'm not going to go into depth into that. Heat sinks are always going to be a problem because of the way heat sinks work. Standard heat sinks are normal. They're really the basics, the basis of the game, and they're what the original rules were balanced around. When they introduced double heat sinks, it made the game a complete mess because double heat sinks are just twice as good and generally not that big of a cost on most mechs. So this here is always where it's difficult to balance it out. I'm not sure where I would play with it. Would double heat sinks be something that'd be early in the technology 3 or something much later? Same with the compact heat sinks. I mean, I haven't seen any mechs outside of weird refits that use compact heat sinks. Technically, compact heat sinks, you can put 2 of them in the same critical slot, but they weigh up 1.5 tons each. That makes them really bad, in my opinion. If they were 1 ton and half a critical slot each, then I think they would be usable. Right now, with how they're set up, I'm not sure they do. I mean, that's a lot of thinking area. You're not going to introduce something like a triple heat sink because that would be super ridiculous. The best possible thing I can think of would be a compact double heat sink that basically takes 1 critical slot and weighs 1 ton. That would just be the highest possible technology you can get in terms of heat sink. Then you've got your add-ons like the coolant pods. The fact that this was technically in Battletech introduced like a super late technology is really weird to me because the concept is really simple. And I think that's a good thing if you redo the tech rules to have the coolant pods be a early tech rather than late tech. So you can have your riflemen with 2 coolant pods instead of 2 medium lasers. So when they start overheating like crazy because you're shooting your large lasers, well, you can cool down real quick. Something along those lines. There's the radical heat sink and answer that was in some weird tech manual. Basically, it's a coolant pod that works like a mask. So it has a chance of breaking every time you use it. I've never played with it. I don't think it's a bad idea, but it might be one of those weird techs. All right. Armor is one of the places where I add the most fun, and I'll tell you why. Because the idea of barrier rating, I think, is really underutilized in Battletech. Those of you who've dug into Battletech know what barrier rating is. Basically, a barrier rating 10 in current Battletech is perfect barrier rating. At barrier rating 10, nothing penetrates the armor once it's hit. Technically, if your barrier rating is less than 10 and you get hit by a weapon that deals more damage than the barrier rating, it can deal a critical even if the armor is not penetrated. Here, I'm starting to think here maybe to play with the barrier rating far more than that. Standard Battletech armor, yes, is barrier rating 10, but that means that a weapon that deals 10 points of damage is absorbed by the armor. But if something were to deal more than that, it wouldn't be. So your standard level technology wouldn't be too bad. But once you get to AC 20 level damage, even if you still have armor, you get it by an AC 20, you've got a chance of getting a critical. And one thing that it allows you to do is have the different armor barrier rating to allow for that variance to play with as well. A thing that I've always decried in Battletech is that our tanks are actually, yes, they're very weak, but they're still way too strong for the actual game. It's supposed to be a game about big stompy robots. Tanks should be an afterthought. The game that does it the best, in my opinion, is mechwarrior 5. There's tons of tanks running around. They're shooting at you. They're annoying, but that's what they are. They're annoying. You shoot them, they blow up. It's fun. It's enjoyable. And yes, you could get in trouble if there's too many of them, but it's not the tanks that are the focus of the game. It's the battle mechs. So basic tank armor and advanced tank armor are what you would have on tanks, and that's about it. Everything else is battle mech armor. Basic tank armor being barrier rating 6, so a large laser goes right through it. The advanced tank armor having a barrier rating of 8 means your large laser doesn't go like butter, through it like butter, but a PPC or an AC 10 will. Primitive industrial battle mech armor, 66% coverage of a standard armor. So you calculate 16 times the tonnage of your armor times 0.66 to tell you how much armor you really have. And that would be at barrier rating 8. So primitive armor would be terrible compared to standard battle mech armor, which is 16 points of protection at barrier rating 10. So most of your standard weapons would be blocked by the standard armor. When you go up to ferrofibrous would have a barrier rating of 12. So your large pulse lasers, your ER large lasers, your clan ER large lasers, I should say, your binary lasers would be blocked by it, but you'd still have some things that start going over. Your Gauss rifles, your AC-20s, obviously. We'll see later a few more things there. And that's all versions of the ferrofibrous. So ferrofibrous, standard, light, and heavy. Random thing I've added, a refined battle mech armor, which is ferrofibrous without the bonus to the hit points. So what it does is it gives you that barrier rating 12 for 2 critical slots. Costs a little bit more than regular armor. But it's a thing that you put on a mech to make sure that it's protected, but you don't have, those extra slots that you can play with to put ferro in. Clan ferrofibrous, barrier rating 13. That could change here. I just threw a number together here. And I'm not sure if we should have advanced light ferrofibrous armor and advanced heavy ferrofibrous armor. That would be a 1.10 modifier and a 1.3 modifier for like 4 critical slots and not crits, and a 1.3 for the full 14 crits. Not sure if it would be worth it. Not sure if it would be something that'd be practical, but it's something you could probably play with. The fancy armor types, laser reflective, as an example, reduces still the same thing, reduces the damage from PPCs and lasers, but also gives an effective barrier rating of 20 against any energy weapons, but a barrier rating of 8 against regular damage. I was thinking of doing the same with reactive and impact resistant, and potentially do an advanced version which gives 20-10 or something like that to give you more options to resist damage. So if you have a mech with laser reflective armor, it is going to be great against energy weapons. But if you're starting to get into fights with people with autocannons, it would be a very bad thing. Same with reactive or impact resistant armor. With a reactive armor, you get it by a Thunderbolt 20, you're good. You get it by a PPC, you're not good. Gives you a little bit of play room there. Stealth armor, I didn't play with that a whole lot personally, so I didn't change a whole lot of things here. Just went with barrier rating 10 for it, so it's a standard armor, but gives you a bonus to penalties to the enemy to it. I never liked the fact that it generates a bunch of EAT as well. I guess that's to balance it out, but I'm not even sure if it's that well balanced. That's the thing that you could probably play with. EAT resistant armor. That's another one that I didn't really play with personally. I don't even remember a single mech having that installed on it. Someone will probably correct me because I'm probably wrong, but I can't remember any. Ferrolamellar, Arden, which are the very common modern ones here. With Ferrolamellar absorbing damage, and Arden armor giving you bonus, technically double maximum armor. It's an easy thing to play with. And of course, an advanced version of those two things. Just because the current version of Lamellar gives 14 points of armor per ton, rather than the advanced version would give you the full 16. That's a very basic kind of thing here. Then we'd have the all weapon explanation. I'll probably do another stream for the actual weapon section. Here we've basically gone through the everything but equipment on your battle mech stream here. And there's a lot of things already in what I've put through, and a lot of things that I'd want people to just give me opinions on, because right now it's easy for me to throw things against the wall and see what sticks. I've got some play testing I've done on my side, and I can play with some of my friends maybe, but having more people who have played the game and having more people who have eyes on things is always a good way to grow these ideas. This design document, if people are interested, I might just post a version of it on a Google Drive, and if someone wants it, you can DM me on Twitter, Twix, X, whatever you want to call it, and I will send it to you, or at least this most recent version. It's not the best design document I've ever done, but it's at least fairly thorough. And any comments, any ideas people are able to throw at me, I would be able to play with them a little bit. There is quite a few weapons, as we know, in Battletech, and I'm not done looking through all of them. There's very little rebalancing that I was thinking of doing, but there are some things that came to mind right away, like increasing the range on the machine guns, trying to rebalance the autocannons a little bit. Those are all things that I'm going to look at probably next stream I do, where I talk about the construction rules. So I think we're going to end it on this tonight. I hope you guys have a very nice rest of your day. Thank you for listening to me. And leave comments, send me messages on Twitter or on, well, yeah, I don't really use Facebook anymore. So yeah, Twitter is the best right now. If you have comments, if you have things you want to discuss, and I will see everybody later. Tomorrow, I should be dropping the video on the Wyvern. I was wanting to do something different, but yeah, I've got the Wyvern that came in and it looked really fun to play with. And next week, I mean, we add a poll to see what mech I would be talking about. It's very, very, unless something really weird happens, going to be about the Zeus, which is a fairly popular mecha from what I understand. So I'll see everybody later, and I thank you very much for listening to me for so long. Bye-bye.